we're live. Welcome to another episode of RunChatLive, episode 19, I think it is. Sorry if I'm very high up. Let me bring myself down a bit. There we go. Cool. Apologies for last week. We were hoping to bring you Lisa Shabbos live from somewhere very remote in the world. As fate would have it, she just come down from a mountain or stuck in a mountain. It wasn't going to be practical. But that's the danger of basically arranging to meet up with real life Lara Crofts. They get stuck in danger and missions and stuff. But anyway, Lisa is going to be back with us in a few weeks' time. I'll send details out for that, so you know. Definitely worth catching up with us when we've got her on the other end of the microphone as well. But in the meantime, now replacing and having his very own episode 19, we got Mr. Chris Kitson, osteopath, biomechanics coach. He's got a fantastic unit up north called the Movement Hub. And we're particularly going to talk about screening for runners, i.e., to what extent can we actually ask a runner in front of us to perform certain movements and then identify what we could refer to as flaws, and then give them specific correctional exercises so that they don't get injured. How much can we do this? How successful is it? Are there any particular movement screens which are more successful than others, and so on? So Chris is a great person to talk to regarding this. So yeah, without further ado, let's bring young Christopher up. There we go. How you doing, mate?
I'm good, thank you. You?
I'm okay, yes. I should warn you that actually now you're talking perfectly, but we had a few problems with setting you up vocally. But so far you haven't skipped a word.
Okay.
So if I do get you to repeat something, it's just because I can't hear it at my end. But so far, touch wood, it's all good. You're looking very youthful and well.
Yeah, I sell aging the sideline as well. So.
Oh, do you? Oh, right. Agent calling as well. I've got to do something about my lighting. I don't do myself any favors. But anyway, thanks very much for coming on the show.
It's quite all right.
So, so before we get into the actual subject, let's have a little listen to your history and how it got to the stage that, we're having you on today to talk about screening for runners. So where did it all start off with, Chris?
It was quite a while ago. I suppose it was kind of about 10 plus years ago. I come from a bit of a different background. So I was kind of playing drums for most of my living at that point. So kind of it was kind of getting into the fitness industry, a bit of training, kind of getting into just general training in the gym. Just kind of built it up really. I ended up moving to London for a bit. Where I did my qualifications for fitness instructor, personal trainer, and kind of working in management within a gym. So
let me just hold a sec. Sorry to interrupt. You said drums. What are we talking? Oil containers or?
Oh, totally. Kind of. Acoustic kits. So I generally playing like a sort of pop punky, punk rock sort of style bands.
Oh, you played?
Yeah, and then I did a bit of like session work and stuff as well. So they get me in and just pay me to come and do studio time for certain things. And yeah.
This is serious stuff then. Amazing. How old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 32 now.
See, that's the thing. You probably get sick of it. I bet you get sick of people. Do you get asked for kind of ID in supermarkets and stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Do you?
So, I don't mind it.
No, it's a blessing. It's great. Yeah. You look so youthful. Oh, it's fantastic. I'm just trying to figure out how old you were then when you must have done sessional drumming and stuff. That's amazing. Yeah. Okay, so sorry, I interrupted, but I love drumming myself, so I was just curious to hear. So yes, you got into sports therapy, did you?
Yeah, sort of personal training, sports therapy side of things. So that was a little bit later on. So I just worked with a lot of clients, personal training wise. Came across obviously injuries and just kind of wanted to develop in that side a little bit really. So yeah, did some kind of got into the sports therapy side of things, kind of a bit of biomechanics alongside of that too, and then went more recently did a master's in osteopathy here in Leeds. So I just did like the full-time course, so it was like sort of 4 years through that, whilst just maintaining my business sort of in the background really. So that,
what attracted you to osteopathy in particular?
I think it was at the point when I started, definitely it was the case of like it seemed to consider a little bit more of the whole person. Again, now looking at that, I'd probably give you a different answer, potentially, just depending on which clinician you see as well. I think the move across to more of like a psychosocial model of care more recently seems to, it shouldn't necessarily matter what sort of practitioner you're going to see, whether it be a physio, chiro, osteo. It's, in essence, as long as they're working with the person in front of them, then that's all that matters to me.
Okay, so that's interesting. So what, just to stick on that point for a sec, it's quite interesting. You said like, so what changed about your pre-concepts of osteopathy and what you discovered and what's, since you passed in it?
Not necessarily inside of the osteopathy side. I think to some extent, I think the background behind it. So it's definitely changing a lot now with all the research kind of coming through, and the ways of thinking are changing a lot. And it kind of gets put a lot of the time into this kind of what I guess like old school style of thinking of being like, okay, so we've got restrictions, L4-5, we need to do this, we need to kind of click your basket into place. We need to kind of facilitate these inhibited muscles and do this and do that, change, forward head posture and kind of that more like wisdom. I think initially I kind of went into it with that in mind, and then I've come out the back of it totally changing my practice really, and certainly my views around other practitioners as well. Definitely with myself not knowing enough about the other styles of treatment and what they can do for people really. So, yeah.
That's fascinating. That's great, because I mean I do get into trouble myself sometimes. I've had some fairly angry tweets and messages from particularly chiropractors, but also osteopaths, when I suggest that, well, just basically why I bring up where it all came from, the fact it was kind of an invention by a guy at the time in both cases who was very ahead of their time. But now, kind of, I think it was around the 1830s or something, osteopathy and chiropractic both kind of came out at the same sort of time. But yeah, like nearly 200 years later, obviously we've discovered a bit more, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just means that, particularly chiropractics and osteopaths have had to evolve a little bit from this idea that there's like a spirit force in your body which kind of heals itself every time you click a bone. We know that's not probably quite true now. But yeah, so I apologize to any chiropractics and osteopaths I've disappointed. But here we go. Here's a real live osteopath in the studio who has managed to move on. Hey, great. And he's here.
Anyway, yeah. I'm gonna get now.
So yeah, so then the Movement Hub. Tell us about the Movement Hub.
Yeah, so it's a relatively new thing actually. So myself and my business partner came together kind of last year. So we come from kind of similar backgrounds, I guess. So personal training mainly, and a little bit of biomechanics thrown in there too. So we ended up, I'd obviously gone more into the therapy side of things, which she doesn't do currently. But yeah, we come together to essentially make the Movement Hub. So it's a place where we can help people with their movement. We can help develop it in different ways, what it might mean to them. We essentially, we just October, we kind of set up a new studio just on the outskirts of Leeds. So we kind of put everything together really of what we've both had a bit of a vision, I guess, moving forwards. So yeah, it's been great. Kind of offer personal training, group training, classes, the therapy side of things, so rehab side as well. And we're very into the kind of exercise rehabilitation side, which is cool.
It's great. I think it's a sign of the kind of times to come. Where, what did you say the background of? It's Kim, isn't it? What's her background?
Yeah, so she's a personal trainer and biomechanics coach.
Yeah. So I mean, it's definitely, I think, the future of just different careers and professions getting together to form a hub, because we know that depending on the individual in front of us, there might need to be some input from all sorts of people with different backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so you've done something probably ahead of its time, probably, because it's going to be the future rather than one room which is just offering osteopathy, or one room offering physiotherapy. It's going to be a health hub, like a little polyclinic. Actually, you didn't do it first because we did it first here at Studio 50. No, well, we did actually. No, yeah, we did. But anyway, no, but it is definitely the future, mixing the different professions together. Brilliant, and that's up north, isn't it? It's what did you say, near Leeds?
Yeah, it's Tingley, just on the outskirts of Leeds.
Yeah. And do you find, like we were talking to Mike James last week, the endurance physio, do you find that having an accent helps you get further in your work?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
It does, doesn't it? Being a northerner, it's just as soon as you put a Welsh or northern, it's like all the adverts on TV. It just feels more approachable. You just feel kind of like, I trust you more than I trust someone direct from Oxford or Cambridge. But it's true. No, it does help.
I think depending on where you are, you've either got to have the accent or you've got to have the beard, though, right?
Oh, don't talk about beards. Actually, don't talk about Mike James. Have you seen he shaved it off?
Yeah. So actually,
I've got to have a conversation about the pain I'm getting in the neck from my wife now. After a few days of going, look, see, he's got one. Look how good we look. And then he shaves his off. All because he's trying to feel young again and get back to how he was 12 years ago. Let me tell you, mate, it takes training, not lack of faith.
I was going to
Honestly.
say, it's probably like that. We're just moving past that little hipster phase now, where you can get away with the big beards. So
Yeah, well,
Mike's obviously ahead of the times there.
I don't know. I think he's just chasing youth. And his wife told him, "Oh, you're much lovelier now. I've been smooth." But yeah, so Mike won't be coming back on the podcast again, but we'll have you back. Yeah. Sorry, Mike, you've left me. Anyway, so yeah, you've got kids as well, haven't you?
I have, yeah.
Ages?
So I've got two. Got Amber, who's she's 14 months, nearly 15 months, and then Josh, who's just turned 5.
Brilliant. Well, I say brilliant, but you and I both know that's not true, is it?
I mean, they keep busy.
Yeah, it's not brilliant at all. It's some of the most painful, exhausting moments in one's life. Yeah. But yeah, let's not dwell. I've had a few days of just projectile vomit, not me, but my eldest projectile vomiting in the back of the car. That's fun.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
It never stops giving all over his little brother.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
great.
they're all just challenges, aren't they? Like, just things to send at you, and then you see how you deal with them.
And how's that? Because you're a keen sports person as well, aren't you? How's having kids affected your ability to train yourself? What are you doing at the moment, sports wise?
Yeah, it's definitely affected it. I'll put it that way. I think, yeah. I mean, I just try and keep a dead simple schedule. I try. So I compete. I say that loosely in triathlon. So I just stick to standard distance. Just to keep my distances down a bit easy to train for, kind of fit in. I'll try and get in. Currently doing a bit more focus on running, to be fair, but at the minute I'll be running probably 2 to 3 times a week. Try and get 3 in where I can, and then getting a couple of strength training sessions in with that too. So it's simple, and then just starting to intro a bit of biking back in as well. Mainly, the bike just gets wrecked in where I store it as well at home. So every time I need to go out, I need to first get it fixed before I can then get out on the bike. So it doesn't help.
Yeah, storage just goes out the window when you've got kids as well, doesn't it? Especially if you've got a wife who likes kind of hiding things up rather than tidying things up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Let's hide that away somewhere. Let's hide it away. Yeah, it is tricky. And of course, recovery as well. I think I find myself talking to a lot of kind of new mothers and fathers that not just the stress which you're living under, you're probably not sleeping as well. You're not recharging those batteries at night time. So that can obviously lead to part of the problems. Yeah.
I think it's probably the biggest thing, like Amber especially has. So Josh was a relatively good sleeper, and Amber just she doesn't a lot better now. But yeah, at the time, like 4 or 5 times a night stuff. It's just yeah, it's one of them, and it is what it is. But it certainly doesn't necessarily help with the performance side.
Would you now there? I mean, would you say after all of this that you still love them, or
Yeah.
what is love?
Oh my goodness, where is this going? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, of course we do. We wouldn't change it for the world. Anyway, so kids, we'll move on from kids. But then we have clients. I'm sure you have clients as well who are in our same situation. They maybe got a new baby, but then they're off doing like Tokyo Marathon was just the other day, yesterday, and I know a couple of dads who've got young kids and they just completed that. And I've never come out and said to them in the eyes, but I'm pretty sure it's because they just neglect their kids. They don't look after them. And they've probably never changed a nappy in their life, or they've just got a subservient kind of wife who just does everything for them. But I find that difficult to mention.
There is that. I suppose. Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I get the same. People that go out and do like multiple things like that, and it's just like I've absolutely no chance of doing that.
No.
So I mean, yeah, whatever it means, then brilliant. But personally, not going to happen. But obviously,
No. I think it's kind of one or the other. You're either a successful athlete or you're a loving father. It's very difficult to mix the two. Unless you're Greg Layman, in which case you just use your children to kind of market your stuff and just show them jumping and flipping and stuff. He managed to do that very well.
Yeah.
But anyway, kids. Well, I mustn't talk about kids all the time because probably some people out there haven't got them yet. So don't want to put you off. So right, today what are we talking about? Screening for. Well, we'll stick to athletes for the moment. Obviously, screening happens for all sorts of different athletes, football players. I think most professional teams have got their club screener. But yeah, we're what's your take on screening in a nutshell? We'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute, but what's your take on it?
I mean, first of all, I guess the term screening would be a little bit meh for it. I mean, it's more like getting an assessment of someone, isn't it, essentially? The screening being more so looking for potential of like a disease state, essentially. But assessment being, okay, right, we're going to assess something and see what comes out the back of it and how we can move forward. Overall, I use maybe like little bits and bats. I don't have kind of like that sort of assessment protocol. It is more so kind of, it's the direction of it just depends on who's in front of me. It totally depends, person to person. The classic answer, right? Everything just depends on what that person's doing in front of you, what they've got going on, how potentially they might move, or reasons they might move differently even. Things like kind of previous injury, if they've not slept very well, for instance, that's all going to change how they can perform in certain assessments anyway. There's just so many variables to consider with any kind of assessment process, really. So, in a nutshell.
So what are some of the? I mean, I like the way. So what do you not like using the word screening? Then did I sense that?
It's definitely. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've used in the past. It's just something that I'm trying to just move away from a little bit.
Would you put it on your website?
Sorry.
Would you put it on your website that we do screening?
Would I? Depends.
Or have you? Let's bring up your website now.
No. It's something where I think so. Sometimes things will get put out for marketing purposes. And I think we see a lot of that kind of things that you'll see on the outset of it and be like, okay, I totally don't agree with what they said there. But then it's kind of thinking behind it and being like, okay, why have they said that? Are they saying that just to draw the attention to them? And then they can hopefully then educate past it. But yeah, we're just trying to kind of get down on the terms a little bit and kind of just be a little bit more accurate with things, that's all. I think certainly when we use screening as well as a bit of a term, it's kind of what that might mean to someone. So if they associate that with, screening for disease, say, then they're essentially going into it thinking, okay, I'm a bit worried about the outcomes of this, essentially, because I might come out of it, thinking X, Y, Z, and therefore running, I should be worrying about this, worrying about that. Whereas actually, that's not the purpose at all. It's a case of trying to help someone move forward, that being the focus, rather than it just being kind of like, right, okay, let's find out what's wrong with you, and then try and make it better.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with that. There's always this, as therapists, as healthcare professionals in the private sector, especially, there's always that kind of line of, what's going to work best on marketing, i.e., you're going to die, I can save you. Book now, but you're not going to write it quite as clearly as that. You're going to twist it up with, oh, this is what could be wrong with you. If it is, you're going to be injured, and I'll save you. And it's kind of, you don't want to. But if you said the total truth, where come on in, we'll take a look, and we'll look at all the possible factors. I'll give you a plan. It might work. If it doesn't work, we'll go to plan B. You're not going to get anyone call. So it's kind of always that problem. Whereas really, what I've just said is probably most accurately what we do. We come in. I'm not going to prejudge at all. I'll listen to your symptoms. I'll take a massive note of that, of your history. We'll look at how you move in certain ways. We'll tie that in, put all the pieces of the jigsaw together. We'll put you on the treadmill. But getting that across on a website in nice font is often so difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
And often the most lucrative form. I don't mean to use lucrative in a negative way, but the one that guarantees the most phone calls is the one which kind of does install a little bit of fear or scientific kind of credibility. We guarantee this. And did you know what the weakest muscle in your body is? It's this, with a picture and a quote. And it's tricky, isn't it, finding that line? I mean, I like your website. I think your website is really good. It's progressive. It's approachable. It's I love the photo of Kim and you doing your bicep pose. I think that just goes, these guys, and yeah, exactly. These guys are like normal people like you and me. It's totally the opposite of the guy in the white coat and the stethoscope around their neck who's like, come on in and I will give you an x-ray and show you where your disc is bulging. It's really good. It's good stuff. So well done on the website.
Cool, thank you. Well, it developed as well.
Yeah, really good. That is it movementhub.co.uk? Yeah, so check that out. We'll put it in the notes. So yeah, so we all do a bit of movement analysis, which I think is a fair way to call it rather than screening. Screening again is a marketable word, isn't it? You put in screening and you're going to get people who think that you are like, well, basically checking their blood almost and finding something that's there, and then it's that accurate. And obviously a movement analysis isn't that accurate. What are the things you do? What do you do to a runner? Obviously it's dependent on their symptom, but what are some standard tests, and what situations do you use them?
So yeah, I mean, that's in essence. So like, depends first, are they symptomatic or not? So we work with a mixture actually. So some won't be. Some come in more so for performance purposes, and some are more for obviously for the more clinical side, so that they're pain. It depends. I'm kind of thinking about where I'm going to necessarily load something up. So it might be, there's some bog standards we might do, like a kind of deep squat position, for instance. We might.
Which one again?
So like a bit of a deep squat.
Deep squat. Yeah, I read your lips then. Twice it faded. Yeah, deep squat.
Deep squat. Potentially might make that overhead as well. So I might put the arms over the head at the same time. Again, it won't necessarily tell us kind of X, Y, Z, but it might give us a bit of an insight into how they move and kind of what they can and can't kind of what forces they can control and what maybe not as well. It might not always kind of cross over into the running though, so we need to consider that too. I think we kind of use then some single leg testing as well. So it might be that we do like a bit of lunge testing or step ups, step downs as well if we're wanting to load them kind of more eccentrically. We might look at some depending. Say if we've got some more kind of masters athletes, like we might look at things like kind of calf raises, both kind of straight and bent knee. So we're focusing on kind of both kind of layers of the calf muscles. Definitely things like that, and then looking into like things like plyometrics. One, if it's right for them, obviously at that time, but can they do them? Are they able to just bounce on their toes? Can they run on the spot effectively? What are they like at single leg hopping? Even bits of change in direction and that sort of side as well. Even though it's mostly a sort of kind of sagittal or front to back motion, it's not obviously all that as well. We've got a lot of different things to consider. Even general running, just running on the roads, say, going off pavements, having to move out of the way of cars, pedestrians, it's all got to be considered. We can't just say, okay, you will get injured when you're running in a straight line. So we try to think about their environment, where they're going to be training, and how that might kind of affect it as well, really.
So yeah, you made an important distinction then, which you haven't mentioned yet. I mean, the idea of screening is it's never, by the very definition, it's not supposed to be a diagnosis. The idea is you're looking at somebody who's not in pain, or as you said, asymptomatic. So yeah, when we're looking at someone who's not in pain, who just wants to come in and know whether they're likely to get injured in the future, they're the tests you just described, are they? Where you're looking at how they deal with load, reaction time, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, essentially at the certain extent of movement qualities, if you like, and then also looking at their potential kind of capacity to deal with load, essentially. So it's obviously not where it stops. I mean, there's a lot of other conversation that goes on there in the subjective aspect of it. So getting a good idea of kind of what their training is, so how often they're running. So looking at obviously that frequency, what intensity they do run at, what distances they're doing, and that recoverability got to be between everything as well. No matter what they're doing, if they're not recovering effectively from it, that's an issue.
Okay, so that's interesting as well. So really, because when we think of screening, we kind of think of a physical assessment. But you're suggesting that part of the screening is a kind of a psychosocial assessment as well, seeing what their personality's like, seeing how they deal with the idea of being injured, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's huge. I mean, there's a lot of obviously research out there on even sleep affecting injury rates as well. So it was they looked at between 7 to 9 hours in an ideal world for the recreational runners to kind of decrease injury risk, and then in elite athletes potentially need a little more too. Might even be kind of 9 to 10 hours. I think they saw, so with the recreational runners, if they were sleep deprived, it was 1 times 7 times the amount of injury rate. So it's huge. So someone's not, it's absolutely massive, yeah.
I mean, ironically, there's probably more quality research out there for the kind of psychosocial assessment of looking at recovery of sleep patterns than there is for a lot of the physical assessments and the ways of moving linked with injury.
Yeah.
It's like, as always, talking to you, it feels like this is what all therapists do. All therapists are just as interested in recovery rates as they are in whether that person has sufficient dorsiflexion in their ankle or something. But I think the reality is, and you probably hear it as well from people who come to you, that a lot of therapists out there, probably because they're still being taught it, are just jumping to the physical assessment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly something. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was definitely touched upon in the degree and everything, but it's not necessarily something that you came out thinking, okay, I really get this background and think about all this stuff that's going to affect that person. There was a good amount of it, but not necessarily how to apply it with people. I think that was maybe where it was a little bit more lacking. We've got to try and definitely when we're educating the people that we work with, trying to get that across to them and kind of let them know that it's okay, to back their intensity down on certain runs, to play around with their mileage, depending on how they're recovering, and always getting that feedback from people, which is the massive, which I think sometimes is the hardest to get, is that kind of constant feedback from people, whereas more so when you're working with asymptomatic people, you tend to get a lot more feedback and you might see them more frequently as well, potentially. So I think it kind of makes it almost easier in a way, getting constant feedback and being able to go, okay, cool, so we've got more information, now we can look at this. So this week, focus on, this, let's pull you back on this run, let's put it on there. If you're going out the night before, then we run after. It's all things that are going to affect him, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially, I think, where part of the problem with screening is, because what you've been talking about is very reactive. It all depends on what the person does as to where your next step takes you, which is why it's so difficult to advertise what you do, because you don't know what you're going to do until the athlete in front of you reacts in a certain way or says a certain thing, or even just their body language tells you a certain thing. So the idea you can have a formula, steps 1 to 7, which is going to then predict injuries, is it's got problems from the very beginning. So you've never done, I mean, I haven't either, but like functional movement screen is probably one of the most famous screening things. Have you ever worked with anybody, because you work with Mike Grice? Yeah, is he big into screening at all? Has he been?
There's little bits and bats. I don't, it's kind of taken as I'm kind of saying it as well, I guess, kind of taking that subjective into account as well. I think he'll use maybe like little elements of it. Not necessarily going through like a set screen and this is, you need to do this with people before you can advise them. It's more so, just taking out bits again, thinking, right, okay, let's do analysis in front of us. What potentially you're going to look at and doing it in that sense.
Yeah, which is why probably you guys, work so well together, and you teach for him. He's not going to have someone teaching for him who preaches from a totally different book, isn't he? And also up there, you've got Rosie Sexton as well, who's another osteopath, and you've crossed paths with her a couple of times.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so Mike and Rosie are based down towards Birmingham, and then I travel down to do a bit of teaching for Mike, and then we're just setting up the courses actually up in Leeds at the new place. So
Yeah, and Rosie again is a fantastic one. We had her on the on RunChatLive back in episode 8, I think, and she's a great example of a progressive osteopath as well. Who, like you say, takes bits out here, evolves massively. So it's all good. It sounds like Mike Grice has managed to surround himself with some pretty cool people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's obviously cool himself as well, but he's got a good little system going down there. Cool. One of the things also about screening that I find is problematic, I wonder whether you've had the experience of it as well, is one of the other barriers to screening is a lot of the time, and we know it as therapists, if we really critique ourselves, you do a test on somebody, let's imagine they've been in here for 5 minutes, and then you get them to do it again and they do something totally different. And although so that's the first point. So it's all, if something is a screen, if something's that accurate, you can call it a screen, then the idea is as soon as you do the test on that particular person, then if they do it again, you're going to notice it, and the same thing's going to happen again. And if it doesn't, then it's not valid.
No, exactly.
And I think hand on heart, a lot of the tests we do in clinic as therapists, the more you kind of live and work, you realize you almost have to gloss over. You do like a Craig test or something, it's like, oh wow, this is kind of retroversion, and then you just go back and check. Oh no, it's antiversion. I'll go back and check. Oh, it's right in the middle. Let's not bother about that. Let's not record that down. Let's get something else, and you can't help it, because that noise, huh?
I'm just going to quickly stop you. Sorry, because we've had to move on to my phone. My battery's going a little bit, so I'm just going to fire. Is that all right?
Yeah, you go for it.
Just so I don't cut out on you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll be 2 seconds.
Okay, that's all right. So while he's readjusting, I mean, tricks of the trade really for people who are listening. A lot of the tests we do in clinic, we know hand on heart that they're not 100% always accurate, because the amount of people who are in pain and yet that test doesn't actually correlate with it, and we just have to kind of ignore it. But being a kind of a more evidence-based driven clinician, you shouldn't ignore it. If you're going to successfully critique yourselves, then you really do have to notice the times when things don't work more than the times when things do work. And that happens all the time in clinic. The reasons why a lot of clinicians feel that something works so well, like, I don't know, acupuncture or trigger points, or even a one leg longer than the other on this person. Every time that particular treatment or test is successful, as in it confirms what we believe should happen, then we note it and we're amazed with it. And the client walks out happy, and we think that we've cured their problem because we did that particular test or that protocol, that treatment. But if we really wrote down, every therapist should have a little pad. Are you back?
I am.
I was just saying that, you know, a true therapist who wants to progress and do their own little personal research should keep a little notepad of when the things they think should work don't actually work.
Yeah.
They make a note of it, because they're the ones you really learn from. The ones which work, just confirm your kind of biases.
Yeah.
I try and get, when I do courses and that, I get therapists to keep a book of when things don't work, and then analyze it, look at it over the course of a week or a month, because it helps get rid of those confirmation biases, and especially when you're doing gait analysis as well, because there's been some great correlation and research of where static tests like the Thomas test, for example, I mean, it's a staple diet of any course, and the research has shown that just because someone lies on a couch and maybe their leg doesn't drop down, you see them on a treadmill straight after, and the hip is extending fine.
Yeah.
That should really get written in the book, because otherwise you presume the tests are going to correlate. But so anyway, you're back, you're sorted now.
No. Even off the back of what you're saying, I get a lot of people kind of coming in saying like, this is tight, this doesn't move and things like that. And a lot of the time, it's just a sensory thing as well. So, it can feel very restricted and feel very tight, but then when you're watching them move, you're like, nah, you're absolutely fine there. It's just more of a sensory thing going on, really. So they can feel something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to see X, Y, Z, just thinking about the Thomas test, and kind of obviously hip flexors and that side of things.
And how do you deal with, because it's interesting what you said, where, I mean, you said to me, I don't know whether you use that kind of blase, it's just a sensory thing, don't worry about it, you're fine. Sometimes I find, with a lot of athletes or patients, as soon as you suggest that it's just a sensory thing, it's tricky, isn't it? Because what are you telling them? What are they hearing when you say that?
Yeah, well, that's it. I think it's not necessarily the words that I'd use with them, but it's definitely a talking point for education for them, of kind of saying, okay, well, it's not necessarily a restriction. You see how you can sense that you're feeling tight through there. However, it might be even that I video them doing a certain movement so they can watch it back. And go,
That's
okay, so you're going to move like this. So you see how if you were to move like this, for instance, I've got a guy who's always on about classic type hamstrings. So he's like, okay, my hamstrings are mega tight. Therefore, I need to absolutely stretch them as much as possible, which is another debate as well, isn't it? But he can go hands totally flat on the floor, straight legs, no issues whatsoever. However, he puts any little niggle that he gets down to tight hamstrings. So it's definitely something where it's helped, doing things like that, doing the testing and being like, okay, so you see if this was this, then you'd expect this to happen sometime.
Good. Yeah, so actually, whereas using tests to show someone's weaknesses, that's huge. You should patent this before anyone else does it. You should, okay, so what are your initials? CK, isn't it? Or maybe the movement hub. So it's the TMH screening, where actually you show people how they are capable and they haven't got restrictions and they have got strength to make them feel better with themselves. That's a great one.
It's totally like Greg Lane, for instance. He's like the what does he call himself? The movement optimist.
That's it. Yeah.
And what a great way of putting things, really, isn't it? It's that kind of focusing on the positive aspect of things and kind of empowering people instead of looking for what they might class as dysfunctions and that side of things. And you don't want people coming in going out feeling absolutely rubbish about themselves because you've just told them that they need to do this because they've got all this stuff in them. It's not nice, is it? So
yeah. It's very true, and sadly, it does kind of happen not just in our profession, but I mean, this morning I've seen a couple of people in clinic, and both of them had, or one of them brought results of. They always bring their MRI scans in, like I'm seriously going to look at them that much, but and each of them, their biggest worry, they both had scans. One was an X-ray, one was an MRI, and both of them came in with that nervousness simply because they'd been advised. I mean, sometimes it is necessary to get the scan done, but they both carried that kind of nocebo effect of, because they'd been advised to get a scan, they were worried that something really structurally wrong had happened.
Yeah.
And in this case, I mean, there might be something which scan shows up, but in this case, one of them was like a 70-year-old lady whose scan is bound to show up something which could be interpreted as fragile, and it had written down on it, and it was like it mentioned bulging discs and degeneration, and again, I mean, that made her feel she was really worried that something, rather than worrying about not moving enough anymore, not doing any form of strength work, not practicing coordination or balance or agility at all. So, I mean, all of these things which are explaining why the person has the symptoms. So, yeah, it's that's the tricky thing, isn't it, about screening? It's straight away leaving the person feeling vulnerable.
Yeah, it's
and that's where the research comes in as well, isn't it? Like you said, we know that can have a nocibic effect and actually amplify pain.
Yeah. I mean, someone, especially when you consider kind of even anxious people as well, people that might struggle with depression, anxiety, like we know that they're generally going to be sensitized a lot more to things as well. So then if we come in there with a load of like nocebo and kind of reinforce everything they don't want to hear, then what state are they going to be left in? And I think that's sometimes where screening, where the assessment process of it can sometimes go. So it can make them feel actually a little bit more anxious about things. And if we're going in and saying this dysfunction, we need to improve even functionality here and here and here, they kind of go out going, okay, should I even be running? Or am I just going to injure myself? And it's not where we want it to go. It wants to be a really positive experience and just kind of give them some tools that can help them to move forwards.
Yeah, definitely. It's very true. And again, I'm quite cynical, but I haven't done a training course for a while. But I'm still under the impression that there's not enough CPD out there which kind of practices and helps younger therapists do what we're talking about. It's all still very the latest manual therapy technique, the latest screening, the latest kind of structural thing. Whereas a lot of CPD should be about the latest way to get the point across that although we're saying pain is an output from the brain, that doesn't mean you're making it up. I mean, that in itself could be a CPD course for a day, just getting explanations like that along. And there's a gap in the market. I'm too old and tired to try and fill it. But there's a few. I know, like Ben Cormack, I always shout out with this. He's very good. He's a very approachable guy. Hasn't got a northern accent. He's got a London accent, but it's still strange sounding enough to kind of make that affection towards it. But have you ever done any of Ben's courses?
I think Ben's a bit sick of seeing me, really. He got stuck in a hotel purely by chance. So it was nice. We got to have a bit of a chat in the bar afterwards and stuff. And that was at Mike Rice's place, actually. So I really like.
You say you got stuck in a lift with him?
No, in a hotel bar.
In a hotel bath? A bar?
Yeah, he was staying. I wasn't stuck in it. He was staying in the same hotel.
Because we've seen photos on the internet of him and Mr. Meekins kind of sharing a jacuzzi. So I wonder whether this water fetish thing. So you were stuck in a bath with him?
Yeah, well, and then have you seen? So Adam Meekins has now shaved a lot of his hair off, and he
saw that.
Like Ben.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's very. They're definitely like they're married. Half the time they're defriending each other, and then half the time they're making up again, and they call each other Boo Boo and Moo Moo. Yeah, it's all there's enough interesting case history on those two alone. But so Ben's Adam's courses as well, obviously, are very much focused on the psychosocial part of the bio, not losing all the bio, but remembering there is a psychosocial part in the word as well. But there's still a gap, I think. I mean, I had a friend recently, actually, Alex Backhouse, who was on the podcast as well. He did a master's in strength and conditioning. And he was saying that in the masters, there was loads of talk about psychosocial aspects and the whole placebo, and all that. But unfortunately, they're waiting until masters level, where really this should be going out. Right, first thing today we'll talk about on any manual therapy is this, but it hasn't quite hit home yet. Cool.
Always to, I guess, like rewrite a program for something, like a university degree. I would obviously, but like I think it's something where the very start of it would purely just be like communication, and just working with people, because it's massive and it's totally like we just forget about human beings that we're working with, living, adapting organisms. It's definitely something where everything's focused on, the kind of pathological side of things. You need to look out for this and do this. And it's certainly great in terms of safety, don't get me wrong, but it's not necessarily something that makes a great clinician in my eyes if they're not communicating with people.
Yeah, no, it's a very valid point. I think it was, I can't remember. Have you ever seen No Pain Mike? I can't remember his surname. It's gone from my head now. Mike Stewart.
Yeah.
He started off, quite full credit to him. He started off quite a few years from a lot of the other people. Just saying, like, as therapists, how many of us have actually studied teaching before, or educating, because it's a totally different ball game. What you learn on a therapy course, has nothing to do with teaching, or and it's still very true. I don't think there's many elements of how to teach or how to work with different styles of learning and that sort of stuff, and how to deal with different people in it's something that's still not addressed. So right.
Sorry, even on the teaching at the moment, it's all going to be kind of learner led as well, and teaching to the person in front of you, and like you were talking about, different teaching styles and how they can take that information on, and it's a similar thing, really, isn't it? Essentially.
Oh, definitely. I remember my first teaching experience was probably many, quite a few decades ago, and it was just TEFL, teaching as English as a foreign language.
Okay. Yeah.
The story of that was you learned so much about not translating, just getting the person, the student, eliciting a response, which is kind of what we try and do in clinic as well. You don't just say, this is what's wrong with this and that. You let them come out. You don't just tell them you can't do this because of that. You let them, and the penny drop.
Yeah.
Like you said with the hamstring thing, my favorite thing is always, well, not always, depends on the person, but maybe getting them to touch their toes or pick up a dumbbell. And eventually I made them do it maybe 26 times. Yeah. And then from the floor, they go, I haven't got tight hamstrings, have I? That's a good response, because then they realize that it's just that cognitive change opens the doors to a whole new understanding rather than just telling them and, giving them a lecture. So, yeah, it's if there is anybody out there who is giving courses on making therapists better teachers, then yeah, get in touch with me, because I'd love to have you on the show. The other thing I want to touch on as well, we kind of moved on it, but I've got it on my notes here, was the problem. That's the other thing about screening, is the problem in defining what's normal.
Yeah,
we've kind of touched on it, but the research is quite big on there is very little norms, isn't there, in the way we move and the responses we have to move with regards to pain and injury. Is there any particular norms that you've either learned in your courses or through personal experience which you now know aren't necessarily norms, or things which happens in other clinics which are regarded as norms but aren't?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess part of it, well, the most classic one I can think of is probably the kind of overpronation, if you like. Kind of being okay, so we need to draw a line down the calcaneus, and if it goes past this line, then we're overpronating. If it doesn't, then we're all good. I think it's probably the most classic one in terms of, like, we don't actually know what normal is for people. Some people might be a bit more like everted, so with the heel kind of dropping inwards slightly, or slightly inverted as well. I think definitely it's kind of when you first get into that side of things, it's very much like, okay, we need to like avoid pronation no matter what happens. We need to basically just put like a big brick in your shoe just to stop you dropping into pronation, because that's going to set you up, for like medial tibial stress syndrome and kind of issues and that side of things. And yeah, I mean, it's just, again, when you look at the evidence behind it, there's not that much there. There's definitely a bit of an argument for certain things, but not much evidence that's kind of going across the board. Yeah.
That's a very good example, actually. I hadn't thought of that myself. I was thinking more of kind of like various rotations of the hip, but yeah, the pronation is a method of screening which was used for years by the running shops, which we now know wasn't screening at all. It was like diagnosing and offering these solutions to something that wasn't even there. So no, that's a perfect example. And if that method of screening was so wrong, then yeah, it does open the door to other typical things we do. Yeah, sorry, I stopped you. What else? What else are the forms of movement?
I think, yeah, I mean, say in terms of even, how the hips are, and like, even when you come down to like gait analysis and kind of looking at, crossover patterns, for instance, and that side of things, it's kind of getting a good idea of like how even like the morphology of that person, if their pelvis is more anteverted or extroverted, for instance, it's going to make a difference. It's some things are going to cross over into movement. Some things they're going to be able to, kind of change and adapt for. But essentially, again, I think it comes back to kind of the body's kind of trained like that through life anyway. So if someone's say got an anteverted pelvis and it's obviously been like that since birth, then they're going to be pretty damn good at moving that way. So if we try,
people are listening who don't speak your osteopathic language, what are you meaning by anterior pelvis?
Basically just like changes in like in the hip socket, essentially, so that how the hip moves in the hip socket. So anteverted, usually you'd see that people have loads of like internal rotation, where internal fluids, for instance, and retroverted, as an example, might be the opposite, so that they've got loads of external rotation when they come right out, but they might have like barely any internal rotation. So it might be, as if we were going in kind of older style training in terms of clinician side of things, it might be, okay, well, this is, this needs correcting. We need to make sure that you've got this amount of degrees in your hip going this way and this amount of degrees this way. And it's just not the case.
That's a big one, isn't it? Because a lot of women, for example, believe that their issues are because of internally rotating knees when they do squats or single leg balance and stuff. But yeah, you're highlighting the fact that depending on the structure, the way their thigh bone enters the hip socket, it may be that we expect them to actually turn their knees in a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not bad. I think even when we have certain things where we'll be like, okay, this might make it a bigger risk factor for one certain sort of condition, if you like, it's sometimes we need to consider like they can actually positively adapt to that movement. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that they've even changed their strategy. It might be for a reason. Watching the way it moves, we know that we can kind of shift forces a little bit by changing the movements. Classic example, look at step rate in runners. So looking at the cadence, we can increase their step rate. We might shift loads a little bit more down into kind of the foot, ankle, leg, and then vice versa. If we're looking to shift loads a little bit further up towards the pelvis and lower back to offload, I guess. Well, not offload, but relatively the lower leg, then we might want to kind of slow that down a little bit too. So it's just the person in front of you again, isn't it, really?
So now we're kind of encouraging people and athletes to realize that often it's not the way they move, it's just the way their body's dealing with the forces caused by that movement. And that's something we can play around with as well. So I think it's important to finish up on, and listening back sometimes to my podcasts, I worry sometimes that they just come across as this is rubbish, this is rubbish, this is a myth, this is rubbish, that's not true, they're telling you lies. And it doesn't show enough what we can do and why people should still like kind of pick up the phone and come and see us. And you've just highlighted it, very much so, that we can look at the way they move, and particularly if it's linked with pain, and we can offload certain tissues, get them to move in a slightly different way to allow the activity to continue, like with cadence increases or decreases. And then they may go back to the way they normally moved before, and the pain might go and not come back again. So there's still lots we can do. It's just not a case of looking at a book and going, oh yeah, that's why you're hurting. Of course it is. That's old school. Very interesting.
A big version of that in terms of the like glute medius strength and like crossover gait again and that side of things, like where we can actually work on building strength in that kind of into those muscles essentially, but then see no change in the actual way that the person's moving as well, can't we? So but we can still have systems.
Yeah, no, very interesting research come out of that. Yeah, and that surprises a lot of. And I can understand why that surprises people, and we see that a lot here in clinic. I mean, everybody we see, regardless of what injury they had, has probably been given some clams or kind of a leg abduction to do. Seems to be a very handed out exercise, but very few of them have actually been given exercises or drills to actually use that new strength, to change, like I say, to change the blueprints that the brain and nervous system has got. So yeah, again, that's something else which in hubs like yours we promote, hence the name of the Movement Hub. Did you come up with that name?
Yeah, between us, we kind of so Kim's old business was Absolute Movement and mine was the Movement Concept.
Oh yeah, right.
So we brought it together to make a hub.
That's very good. It's a good name to get now, especially because it's like I say, people like yourself, and that's why I wanted you on the show. I do believe hand on heart that your type of operation is a thing of the future. We will see kind of these hubs more and more around the country where it's not just this is what I do. I'm just an osteopath. I'm just a physio. I'm just a chiropractor. Because the general public, hopefully through podcasts like this, will realise that it's more of a jigsaw than that. Okay, it's very rarely just your bones, just your muscles, and just do this exercise or just don't do that. It's not. And we can't tell what it is until you actually come along and we give you a whole battery of different tests rather than just one screening.
Yeah.
Wicked. Okay, well that's great, Chris. You've already told us you're training, so triathlons. You say, what distance did you say you're doing? Which one? I missed that word.
Just standard distance.
So Olympic one, is it, or a sprint mini one?
Yeah, Olympic, yeah.
Okay then. And am I right in thinking that now the kids are getting older, you're going to try and bring that up to the next level, or maybe a little half Ironman or something, or?
Potentially. It's
if you want to, I'm recording this, so if you want to.
It totally depends whether my wife's watching or not.
I'll go on the phone.
Yeah, I think in terms of my running, even I've considered moving up towards I did a bit of a 10-miler in January. That's a trail race. That's a bit different. And then considering moving up to maybe do like a half marathon like later on this year. It'd be nice to get that half Ironman in there. I think it's in there. It just needs to be training schedule needs sorting a little bit in terms of just getting it in. That's all. But it'd be nice too. It
would be, because then you got the half man, you got the full Ironman, and then you got the Mike James back-to-back Ironman.
Oh
which obviously by shaving his beard off he'll be doing again. We're looking forward to seeing that back-to-back. That's all it takes.
I mean, aerodynamic straight off, and that he's the winner.
Yeah, no, my kids are 3.5 and 1.5, so I'm getting to that stage now where I should be able to play around and not feel so guilty about leaving someone else to look after them. Be able to get out myself. It is so difficult with time. It really is, and you can only push a kid in a buggy for so long. Mainly because they're screaming and fighting. People look at the seafront going, "Really? You really a loving father? Look at them tearing each other apart." I can do that for about an hour, but any more than that, and it's just, I think it's childish. It's not fair. So well, we'll be able to compare notes then and see if we do manage to get out more and do a bit more exercise. That'd be good. In terms of tutoring and stuff coming up at the Movement Hub, have you got anything coming up, courses or anything?
We're looking at we've got a couple coming up, really. We've got one, we're going to be running a biomechanics trainer course. So that's under biomechanics education. So that's going to be a little bit, that's kind of like late April, early May, just confirming dates. And
where will that be? What part of the country?
That's as well. So that's that place. And then we're also bringing Mike Bryce's course as well. So it's level 5 in like remedial exercise and therapy. So that's moving up to Leeds as well as continuing in Birmingham. So that's we're looking at launching that about late September, early October in Leeds. So yeah, exciting stuff. Looking forward to it.
People can find out about all of this on, is it the Movement Hub or just Movement Hub?
Yeah, so it's the Movement Hub.
Okay.
So we're just getting the website, I say, redesigned at the moment. So we're going to be whacking everything up on there. We've also got, obviously, in terms of social media as well. So the Movement Hub on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram as well, and YouTube, obviously. So yeah, we'll be getting everything out there and ready to go.
Brilliant. Well, I'll make sure that your social media outlets get put into the comments below. I'll type them up. And hopefully people will have had a chance to listen to you on this and contact you that way as well.
Absolutely. Great stuff.
The sound wasn't too bad in the end. It was only a little bit of a few words missing, but yeah, hopefully I think it was enough for people to understand. So thank you for your perseverance. Yeah, we'll keep in contact. I'm going to whisk you away now and just say goodbye to everyone else. So Mr. Chris Kitson, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I'll speak to you in a bit.
Cheers.
All right then, people. Yeah, sorry again for a bit of Freddie style on the mic. Kind of, it's made it difficult. But we did try sorting out his laptop, but it just didn't want to know. So my apologies for that. But hopefully you got enough out of that to understand a little bit more about screening, and to hopefully be wary about therapists who are just working out of a book and saying, "Oh, because you do that, this is the cause of that." If they're not mentioning your training, your other things like what your belief systems are with regards to what you think you've done to yourself, if they're not looking at a bigger picture, it's particularly of your case history, then they're missing vital parts of the jigsaw. Okay, humans, although we share the same passion for running and the desire to get our shoes on and go out that door, we are actually all. We've got significant differences, both physically and obviously mentally, depending on what we've done with our lives and genetically as well. So for the modern day evidence-based therapists to help you, they need to pry into all of these areas, which is why the case history is so important. Screening probably shouldn't be called screening because it's not that accurate, it's not that sensitive. We should really just call them tests, and they can provide useful information. Modern day therapists and gait analysts and osteopaths and chiropractors, we need to realize that they are just part of the jigsaw, and we mustn't think that they are accurate diagnoses or any form. So there we go. That was episode 19. Thanks again to Chris Kitson from the Movement Hub. We will be back. Who have we got next? We're definitely having Lisa Shabbers coming up again. We've got some exciting guests coming up. I don't like giving away now. You'll have to keep in contact with our social media outlets to see who we have got. But I can guarantee we've got at least 5 or 6 people signed up to talk to you on a Sunday at 1:30 p.m. So yeah, keep in touch. Contact us if you'd like to see any particular guests. Matt@RunChatLive.com. The website is up and running and proving very successful. So RunChatLive.com is there. So that's it. We've run over. It's 2:36. So I will thank you once again for listening or joining us live on Facebook, and see you in either a week or a couple of weeks. Take care. You're listening to Run Chat Live podcast, putting the evidence back into running injury and performance.